Hi, this is Norman Long. I'm going to show you reworking a painting called Summer Plaza. The painting was featured in Artists and Illustrators magazine in July 2021, and I'm just going to go briefly through the genesis of the painting, and then so do we get to the part where I'm reworking it. So starting with this image, this is a 12 by 10 inch color study for the painting. It's painted over an old painting, which is really helpful for helping me to generate different colors, surprising colors and shapes. So it started with an abstract drawing, and then the figures were dropped in to Photoshop, and this composition was made when the composition had been generated through drawing already. So it's just so that I have all the photographs of the people in one image. And then this painting was finished and thankfully sold. But this version was started and then it was developed through just layering paint, even splashing paint on and spraying paint on through a bottle, as you can see in this image here. And then so this was a stage at which it was exhibited and it didn't sell, so it came back to the studio and it's ready for a major rework. As you can probably see, this first reworking was done with pretty fluid paint, so well diluted paint with the painting upside down. So I'm just thinking about it abstractly and just rearranging the shapes instinctively, making any changes I feel like. Once I'd done that, I was happier with the abstract arrangement of shapes, and now it was time to start thinking about reintroducing the specific parts of the figures. So I did quite careful outline drawing using pastel, so in colours which related to the painting, to give myself definite shapes to work within, so I'm not just continuing to splash paint around. So the surface had dried and then I redrew with pastel. So here we are in the studio again. Some of the things I do, trying to figure out compositions. This is a photograph of the painting at a much earlier stage, just a printout. And then on top of the printout, I'll just paint with oil paint, trying things out. This had a glaze over the photograph of warm color and different figures taken out and put in and obliterated. See how this figure here, this man, is much bigger now in the but in this iteration. So I'm set up, I've got a palette and I've got some reference photos, nice and big on the screen. It's good to have a time away from the painting, particularly big paintings. And see, these are some notes I made this morning. Shadow areas such as below the box are heavy and grey. We are constantly stopped from moving about freely. Bigger and brighter blasts of light, perhaps, and so on, and put in a real dark to bring out the whole. So this is a little scribbly sketch just to get back into it, and looking at some copies that I've made a while ago. A Tiepolo copy and a copy of a Zoe Frank who I did an online course with. So looking at these, I mean, there's not a lot of strong colour in these, except in certain areas. Pow, 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 pow. All the rest, you know, a little bit of red there, balancing the red over there. There's not a lot of strong colour in other areas, but just punches. And the same in this, we look quite muted colour overall, but I love the way that this dark is decisive. And I'm not very good at those decisive darks. You see how this is very subtle, and it does have really nice colour when you get close, you know, variations within the colours. But I was looking at an area like that. Okay, so maybe you can't tell, but it's got nice variations of green and pink and stuff like that. But within the whole context, it just reads as a kind of dull colour. So I could start jazzing up the whole painting, but that would be just taking it on another 500-mile journey. So really, I wondered to myself, sometimes I set myself, can I finish it today? And if I could, what would it take to finish it? So I thought maybe some strong darks to anchor things, and maybe some strong colours, and maybe some strong whites. So out of this mash of complexity, and I mean, it's a lot about mark making. There's some nice marks in there. But there's not much definitive to hang on to. I don't want it to make it too descriptive, as in the idea itself is that the figures are lost and found. So I don't want to make it all clear by any means. All that waffle really means nothing, because I have no idea really what I'm going to do. That's sort of a vaguest plan. So probably the first thing I might want to do is take my glasses off, because as I look at the painting here, this close, I can't see the whole thing in my vision, and it's kind of overwhelming. So this isn't going to be a fast demo, like an impressive video of somebody who knows what they're doing, but rather of somebody trying to solve problems, and that's what most of the painting is. It's solving problems, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, you set yourself these problems anyway. You set problems that are interesting for yourself, that problems that you want to engage with. I rarely use purple, but I thought there's a lot of kind of purple in this. Most of the painting was done with a limited palette of like 3 or 4 colours, but at this stage, almost anything goes. So this is a glaze, as it were. So dark, transparent colours, diluted with a medium. So this is sap green, which is a very transparent green. I don't want to be too colourful though, because it's dark, so I'm mixing a lot of that other colour in with it. So I don't know if these marks will be left as they are, as sort of gestural marks, or if they'll be softened. I'm sure they'll be modified in some way. These are all transparent colours: burnt sienna, sap green, phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, dioxazine purple, and permanent rose. All transparent colours. So I start out, like you might ask, how do I know where to put these? I don't know where to put them. I'm making pure guesses. I'm trying to just use my instinct to respond to it, and then hopefully it'll tell me some sort of pattern or arrangement that will work. They're very disconnected. And so, just looking at that Zoe Frank, it has connection and disconnection. This is all connected as a dark, and that's disconnected dark. So I don't want them all disconnected. If we look at the way that the darks in these brilliant compositions are all connected, and the lights are all connected for the largest part. So, I don't want it spotty, but I have to put some spots down first to begin to find a place where they might connect. When you're relying upon intuition, it's easy to second guess it, and I just did that. Particularly with filming this, particularly with filming this, I had some feeling about a dark down here, but then I thought about being filmed and thought, I wonder if that's the right thing, and I lost it. I lost that suggestion that came from wherever suggestions come from. So my thought is you've got to be able to switch on that trust in your instincts, and you've got to be able to trust it. And it's a quiet suggestion, it's not dogmatic, and you can talk yourself out of it, and you lose it. So now I need to open up again to to that voice, and to be honest, and it may never suggest that again. It may suggest something different, which will be all right. So I'm putting myself at the mercy of whatever creative spirit there is. Funny thing to do. Having put those statements down, of course they're very dark in relationship to everything else that is there, and I've constantly got this urge to soften them, but I'm resisting that urge at the moment. Because I think it's something I do a lot, is to do something and then soften it. And I'm trying to be a bit more decisive, a bit more emphatic. So, but these, I'm stepping in now to slightly more subtle, slightly lighter velatura, I'll call them, like a veil. I think of that as a veil. Glazes, all this terminology is very slippery, but I see a glaze as a dark, transparent wash, and a velatura as a semi-transparent wash that has some white in it, something opaque in it, and then a scumble is a very dry application. That's my terminology, which people will disagree with, but that's fine. So for me, this is a Bellatora. It's slightly lighter in colour and less transparent. And it'll hopefully provide some sort of bridge between those really dark marks and then the very lighter field overall. So I've got a different brush for the blue, purple, a brush for the warm, and a brush for the green. Well, that hardly reads as any lighter than those full strength glazes. So now I'll allow myself to modify it a bit. Let's see. Oh, that's interesting. Goes really mottled. It's a boring brown, but it's good texture. Anyway. So I'm just using an old business card thing to do a bit of scraping. It's probably a bit subtle to be working like that at this stage. There's so much else to resolve. So sometimes you have to work against your instinct, because it might always lead you in the same direction if you always work with your instinct. So my instinct is having done this, it feels so good to soften these darks into these more atmospheric and integrated half tones, just to make. But if I continue with that, I'll just end up with a painting that is a little bit stronger in parts in the darks, but essentially the same thing. And so I want to give myself an extra boost of courage to do something that is a little bit braver than that, than just tidying it up and making it a little bit better. I've been doing that for months, years I've been working on these paintings. And even as I talk then and don't think about what I'm actually doing, I instinctively move to soften. And in that instance, it's all right, of course, in little bits, but my overall thing is that I want to. Well, my strategy, my thought at the start was towards some strong blocks of colour, not just darks. And I've got a couple of urges in that direction, towards stronger blue here and up here. So I'll clean off these glazes and try and step into applying some stronger blocks of colour. So this is going to be more opaque paint, so I might mix it with a palette knife. It's kind of easier to know what colour you're going to arrive at when you're mixing opaque paint than when you're putting on glazes, because you can actually look at it next to the painting like that and say how much jump is there from the painting to the new colour. Of course, if you're dragging paint, it's an optical change from, this is solid. If you were to completely cover it, that's what colour it would be. But if you're going to drag the paint, then you've got to take into account that it's going to have some of that undercolour showing through. I don't know if this should be like a real punch of strong colour, being as it's one of the first areas that occurred to me it could be a strong colour, or if it should be a subtle one. I don't know. I don't know whether I tend towards subtle or bold, I suppose. I think in my early work, I was very bold tonally. And this blue, so this blue is very much like a cerulean blue, a blue that tends towards green, which is kind of safe within the context of this, because it occurs a lot. It's not far from this colour. Or should I go for this more purpley one that isn't as common in the picture? That really pops a lot more. I'm gonna go with that. I like the way it really pops. It just feels more exciting. So I'm going to use it's a nice brush. Not used it much. It's a Ivory Egbert from Rosemary. Egbert has really long bristles, and I'm going to put it in a can so that I can make the brush stroke from back here. A friend of mine from Pennsylvania Academy called Libby Williams, she's a good painter, and she's one of those people who could switch between abstraction and representation really well. And she told me that she never repeats a colour. So as I go for this colour on this leg here, I'm not going to use exactly the same colour. Although it would be tempting, because I've spent a while mixing up that colour, I'm going to just change it subtly. You see how it's just a slight warmer variant. I like that. I like the way that it draws the eye, draws the eye there. That feels a little bit too strong though. I'm just gonna put some warm colour into that just to quieten that colour down a little bit. It's so funny. I mean, you'll look at it and think, "Wow, what's going on?" But for me, suddenly it's a far more exciting painting than it was when I started, however many minutes ago. I just feel happier. that if I was to keel over and die right now, and then the video would stop when the batteries run out, that they would say, wow, this guy was on fire when he died, rather than this guy didn't know how to finish paintings. So here's like a little self-congratulation, and then I have to step back from that and put myself in it again and know that I can mess it up just as quickly as I can make it better, and that any progress that's been made has been made through making honest and as strong decisions as I can muster in the moment. And then even then, there's no guarantee that that will bring about a better painting at the end of the session, or even if it is a better painting at the end of the session, that it'll ever become a really good painting. But it's a kind of living in faith that something will coalesce. So now, having had that little soliloquy, now I have to put myself back down the mine to think about what next. So here's what I'm thinking. My thoughts are going from one thing to the other. I was thinking that the central area needs some punch, something happening. It's very vacant as yet. And then I thought, yes, but my stated aim was to put some blocks of strong colour in. First put the darks in, and then put some stronger colours in. I started with that one strong colour, and what I should really do then is put a strong warm in to balance or to give the two parameters. So then you've got the darks and the lights, and the cools and the warms, and then you can work within those extremes. So that's what I should do, but I was looking around for something that could become like this, could become a strong block of warm colour, and struggling to find anything in particular. And then I started thinking about how we're influenced, particularly when we get excited about a painting, that it may at some point in the future be finished. We start thinking about the audience, what a particular gallery, a particular people or person, and what they may think or say, and it becomes a real slippery mind game not to fall into painting to someone else's agenda, or painting to please someone else, or even thinking it's better than it is, or thinking it's worse than it is. All those slippery mind games. So that's what I've been thinking. So I could give her this is a walking lady here carrying a box, and she's got feet here and here. I could give her red shoes, but they would be small blocks of red. Really, I should be looking for bigger blocks. Just looking at that Tiepolo that we looked at, I'd forgotten about how, it's amazing. It's got a strong red here and a strong red here. This painting was cropped here. So this is now in a different part of the world. This is in Scotland and this is in Germany somewhere. So I've put it together again. And it's a marvellous composition. But the reds are there and there, the blues are there and there, and then the yellows are there and there. Maybe I should learn something from that. So if the blues are there and there, then the reds should be there and there and there. Who knows? I can't think. I'm stuck, as they say. Stuck, so I'll turn upside down. This might affect the drips. I'm really looking for reds where I can put some some decent reds, but I'm not finding anything very well. But I want to make this area a bit darker, maybe to continue the sense of space going back in here. And maybe within these extreme areas at the edges of the canvas, I might be able to find some place where I can put a strong red or... So back to transparent colour, or semi-transparent now. Remembering that the last time I put a glaze of this on, it was much darker than I thought it was. Because when I look at it against this grey, it looks about the same as this, or same tone of value as this. But when I look at it against that, see how much darker it is there. I should really do a lighter grey on my palette, because a lot of my paintings are a lot lighter now. Socks. It's good having 3 boys who always blow through the socks. See, this has a sort of side-to-side movement, and this has a messy circular movement. I'm always not annoying. This is a good tool. It's a Princeton catalyst, but it always takes off more paint than I think it will. It's good with liquid and moving stuff around, but it does take off a lot of paint. So just looking at the painting now, it seems to suggest it wants to be red here. Now I'm a bit wary because this is a figure. This is a male figure. Here is around where his hands are. I don't know what would be red in that area. So around here, something red. Do it now. remembering that if we add white to it, it makes it cooler as well as lighter. Which in a warm painting like this will stand out a lot. A cool red will stand out a lot. A warm red will stand out less. And remembering too my experience of having put, look at this, looks like nice and light here. If I put it on here, really dark. I remember that. Colours are all about context. So I'm mixing up like a red, a pure red, okay? But in this context, a pure red, to read as a pure red, it's probably got to be a light orange, really. Like if I did that actual medium, warm and cool red, quite intense on here, it would just be too dark and cold because most of the painting is warm and light. So within this context, this will read as a pure red. So we think about the colour, well, think about where it's going to go, think about the colour, and then think about the way of applying it. It seems very premeditated, and it is a bit. I want this to be scratchier. So I'm just using an old bristle brush, quite scratchy bristle brush, and I'll probably don't even need the can, and just work it in to the area. So often the question is, how much do you want it to stand out and how much do you want it to fit in? That's my constant question. So I'm just gonna drag this a little bit further with the lighter orange, just to make it fit in a little bit more. Well, that enlivens things. That makes me excited when I look at it in the mirror, look at the whole thing, because with the combination of the darks and then that and then this. Now this definitely overpowered that in its excitement, in its vibrancy. Yeah. Now suddenly this looks really boring and brown. I've a sort of fear of brown, fear of things becoming brown. It's I don't know why that is. I do remember some critic once saying, and I'm sure it was a line that he just threw about to show his manhood. He said something about drowning in brown soup. And I wasn't impressed. I wasn't impressed with his work, and I wasn't impressed with the comment. And it's sort of annoyed me ever since, to the extent that I almost avoid brown. And of course, brown can be arrived at in so many different ways that it's almost silly to even think that way. But we're human. Anyway, I feel like a green could come out. This is tending towards green, and some more green could come out there. So on a more positive note, I have another hint about what could happen next. I've kept my, or most of them, two of the brushes that had the glazes on, I've kept in case I have to go back to them, but I don't think I will be doing. Sorry, I'm going to use that glaze brush for the green. I'm kind of excited about this bit, the green, but I'm kind of excited to do it. Let's get this green in. It doesn't want to be too acidic, so with it, remember the context of a warm painting, if I put this really acidic green down, it's going to pop too much, so I want to make it slightly more towards orange so that it doesn't really jump out too much. So I'm adding some burnt sienna and some of this, I think this is the new Winton colour, yellow green. On this large scale I tend to just use Winton mostly, unless some of these will be artist quality that I've had from other paintings, but it's not as though at this stage I'm using massive quantities of paint, like earlier on I was. I feel like using something different to put this paint on, like a different tool, maybe a rag. So as the colour comes around to this side, oh, maybe I want it to be a little bit cooler and lighter. Sometimes I'm looking in the mirror constantly as I'm trying to make decisions, and sometimes I look in the mirror and then say, all right, in that area, so in this area I want it to be closer to this green. And then I look at the painting in the right orientation, not in the mirror, and I can't find it. I thought, where was that spot that I thought needed something? So again, when I look at this now, I feel like this is too strong and I want to tidy it up and make it softer and nicer. But you know, you can always make it softer and nicer later. You can't make it strong and dynamic again in exactly the same way. You can rub it out and do it dynamic again on top. But so I'm going to resist the urge to tidy it up too much. So we'll take a break there. Okay, we're back. I took it outside to photograph it in progress, and I just had it stood sideways, and I looked at it as an abstract painting, and it feels like this area here is starting to coalesce into something dynamic, but this whole section here is so, what's the word, vacuous, so open, so nothing gutsy. The marks seem like small little marks of drawing when you see the painting as a whole. So that was my observation. So having it sideways, I felt like I maybe wanted some green verticals, and then there was some red somewhere, but I've forgotten that bit now. But I'll look again for those. Yeah, green down here. Maybe to echo this green here. Should perhaps be a bit darker even. And then this here felt like it should be redder. So I think it's because this is a vertical form, a lady, this is a vertical form, a man in space. Of course we're looking at it sideways now, and then there's the ground plane which goes back like that, and I felt like this shape wanted to be stronger, to draw the ground plane, to make it more. I have to relate it to these real darks and that relatively dark, so it needs to be darker than what I've mixed. And that's an ugly, it needs to be a nice blue. I don't know, I think I'm a bit purer than that. Here goes. So if that's good, I think that's a good move. I tried to connect it to this as if it was the same colour that had just been brushed as one, and now it really needs to connect to this here, so that the space could go back, and that, because that's a very different colour to that, as if the space could go back and connect there. So it doesn't need to be the same colour that I use, but needs to be, I call them bridge colours, colours that connect from one to another. Let's see what this actually is. It's nothing in particular, it's just a background. So I'm trying to make it look like it's just a bit of a zigzag back into that space. I wonder if it might connect across to that one too. If I pretend that connected across. So you see how these three shapes now are in relationship, and maybe because they go darker, maybe they go back a bit in space, I don't know. I was wondering about outline and how outline might function, how I might be able to get outline to work for me. Outline for me is a bit of it's like a last resort. I'm looking for an Egbert, one of those long-haired brushes. Oh, here we go. These. I don't use them all the time, but they're good for outlines, and I just feel I might strengthen the outline here, because I'm happy with the composition. That really helps, just to energize that central area. But the left and bottom still looks very light and kind of weak in that regard. Imagine having an assistant just to, every time you step away from the palette, they quickly clean it up for you. you could paint twice as fast. These are just magazines that have been cut up. Very useful to wipe stuff on. I'm going to have to refresh some colours. There was an earlier stage in this painting where I really went to town on it upside down, and did a lot of massive rework. And I feel like since that stage I've been working on the subtleties, hoping that would be enough to bring it to a conclusion, because it did improve it, but it seems to have gone weak since then. I seem to have been inhibited in some way. That line is a bit isolated. It's not a particularly beautiful line. That makes it a very strong form. The strength of that outline there and the sort of reflected light, it makes it a really strong form. You can't move through that anymore. I may have to soften that. Should really look at what this is. So this is the torso and this is the arm. So that arm could reflect some of that warmth back into there, which would be helpful. Be a little bit bolder than that. You see how now this shape is almost the same colour all the way along, and I don't like that. It's just too long. So I'm going to bring it closer to this greenish colour up here. I'm in danger of getting really sloppy with the paint there. Oh, that might be enough. That might be enough. You know, if you paint over and over and over, the paint just gets skiddy. And you can overcome it by putting loads more paint on, but when you're looking for these dragging effects and glazing and so forth, it's really best on a dry surface. It's always tempting to do more, isn't it? There you go. One little part won't make or break the painting. It's good to remember that. At least there's some colour battle going on here now. This is a drip. Drips are alright in the right place, but just reserve the right to get rid of them. It's cool when you see drips in a painting that go, you know, this drip will be actually going sideways when the painting's hung. These drips are going up. You see that in decooning quite a bit. Alright, let's have a look. That's great, it's exciting. It seems to be suggesting that it wants this dark to be darker over here, this shadow, to almost like an arrow or triangle shape to hold things in there. And this does need, this dark shape does need settling down just a little bit, I think. It's quite exciting at this point. So I'm thinking about the colour that might be useful for this shadow in here, and I'm thinking not super purple like this, not super dark like this, but maybe something akin to that. Oops, I shouldn't have touched it because it's still wet. Something akin to that might be good. It's a little bit too blue, is it? I'm not exactly sure on the shape here, but we'll see. No, see these shapes, I have designed them earlier, and although they're too subtle, the design of the shapes was alright, I think, and now I'm messing with that. Messing. Okay. Making a mistake is fine because it tells you. So it's better to make a mistake than not risk anything. See what I mean by that? The shapes, I'd already sort of planned out the light and dark shapes over long successions of repainting, and there I was trying to do something dynamic and exciting and change the design of the shapes, and just didn't work. Just didn't. I don't know why. So it needs to be closer to this sort of tonality, not as dark as that, but closer to it. That's maybe just a... So there's colour and then there's tonality. So you want the colour to be strong, but if you want the tonality to be a bit stronger, a bit darker, but I don't want the colour to be really, really powerful as well, because then it'll just draw all the attention. So I'm thinking about the connection across here, and then I'm thinking of just lightening it, or just lightening it there, because that purple shape is just a little bit monotonous. Maybe. And this shadow I actually have cutting across this lady's leg now. Big decisions, big decisions. One thing I want to do is I want to make this cooler, like this colour in here. But that's like a subtle decision. Really, more important is this, because this is a foreground entity and it's very subtle in colour. It's not being amped up at all. I was making a series of good decisions there, and then I started to think. I just looked at it and thought, oh, this might look good in the gallery. And it's just, that's not the thought. That's not, such a distraction to be thinking about that. It really is. Just, it's like a thief of real sensitivity and real, when you feel like you might be touching something that you never touched before. And then a thought like that, it's so, like tantalizingly, it's a normal thought. Don't you paint paintings to look good in a gallery? Oh yeah, kind of. But if you're thinking about that when you're doing it, you really get down a rabbit hole. It really does mess you up. So how do you access that place again where you're responding and I don't know. Try again. So I'm liking it more, and that's success in painting. That is success. I'm liking it more. There's stuff to do, obviously, but I feel like it's pushed the parameters of the darks and the lights and the warms and the cools, and it's a more exciting painting than it was when I started this morning. Whether I'll do some more on it today, I don't know. But for the moment, I need to just sit down for a few minutes and think about what colour I can work into here, how I can transition from the head of the cyclist into that background, and many other questions. So I'm just going to have a sit down and think about that. So we're back. A little think, a look, and things like this needs to be warmer in here. I couldn't really decide on a definitive colour for this, but maybe just make the colours stronger. So warmer in here, cooler in here, so it just has a bit more pop. Yeah, you can see we've got the reference photo for this chap here. So more warmth in this shadow area. Use this neutral colour, bridging that. Alright, so in the photograph he's got a shirt on. I was ignoring his tie, but he's got his shirt on, so this should be a cool shape, but actually I need it to be warm in here. I just need it to be which is going to make this need to be cooler. So that's all right, but it just needs to transition. This is very cool here, and then warm there. So I just need some transition there. It's all just a bit light, so I may just get some darker tone similar to that into this shoulder. Doesn't need to be super cool. It just makes that male figure stand out a tad too much from the background. Don't you think? So that's a different angle to that now. So it, really, if it was more at the same angle, it might sit in more, connect to the background. I want this dichotomy of it having form but also being lost at the same time. So what in the photograph here is a lit area. Those folds are actually become shadow area in the picture. I'm using warm and cool to signify form rather than dark and light, particularly. Now, because the dark has come near the head, it sort of isolates the head and makes it more obvious. I don't want it to be too obvious. So I'll just take that dark back a little bit. So you see how that sort of disguises the head a tiny bit more. This would have been better, more elegantly painted, if it was just a blue and then the red dragged over the top. So what do I do about that? Do I, as Degas said, perpetrate a crime, you know, use as much cunning as the perpetration of a crime, and do that with the blue and then do the red over the top, or leave it as the ugly, genuine truth? Well, it's not the most important job right now. So here in this foreground figure, I'm pushing the warm and cool, but I also want the sense that this shape can continue through her to an extent, so that we're not drawn to her too much. This is an interesting sort of negative shape between these two figures. Quite tight, quite close with the arm and the arm. I wonder if that should become a more positive force or not. So I'm seeing connections like this line here. It becomes a line, even though it's not really anything physical. It becomes a line. So I just want to allow that to be something a little bit more clearly, perhaps. So if we could connect it a little bit closer to these colours, it would just be a little bit stronger. So it's a long line now, a continuous line, and it's a bit too much. So what I'm going to do is just offset it a little bit down here, so it doesn't quite connect to that line. Just to hopefully slow it down a little bit, so it goes doof, like that, rather than. Ooh, that's kind of exciting, but what I feel now is that having taken this line down here, it needs help to climb up these shapes. It gets lost around here. This is very clear, it leads us up there, but it gets sort of lost in the car park here. So I just need something to help it up this area, and I think if I lighten this to a light blue, it might help. It didn't work in exactly the way I wanted. It's a bit too light there. That's fine, but that's too light there. It's the elbow. The elbow just wants to be a little bit warmer. There's more blood at the at places like the elbow because it's on a joint. I think anatomists will tell you. No, that's the wrong transition, isn't it? It needs to go through red. If it's orange to blue, it needs to go through red, not through blue. What was one thinking? That's better. It's a bit messy, that arm. A bit messy. It's almost as if she's kinked it further back. I should probably find the picture for it to help me out. But well, the lights from the light side in the picture is on the left, and in mine it's on the right. But nevertheless, it feels like the elbow is here when it should be down here. kind of like the effect of her elbow being tucked back further, like pushed further towards us into our space a little bit more. I kind of like that idea, but I'm making it up and I don't know if it really works. This is the battle here between wanting everything. You know, I want it to look reasonably anatomically believable, but I also want the dynamics, and this seems more dynamic to have a kink going that way, but it's not that important in terms of the abstraction of the picture. So in this instance, the observed shapes win out, I think. It's funny how you can do a big painting and spend an inordinate amount of time on one little tiny bit. And possibly on a bit that nobody will ever notice, and maybe that's the point, maybe that's the important part to spend a lot of time on. It's just some transitional area or something like that. This is a really probably boring to watch, I'm sorry. I'm just kind of in it now, in this little section, trying to get the anatomy to work, and yet it not be too, not draw too much attention, and trying to keep the paintwork reasonably fresh. All those things at once. Now the part that's messing it up really is that lost stage there. It needs to be defined a little bit more. So I need to think about what I'm going to change. I'm just going to change it slightly to more like this colour here. Not a big change. I did consider, the really dark blue, but I don't think it needs that level of definition down there. I think that would be too much. Even that's getting quite descriptive and hard edge down there, isn't it? But that's all right. I might sharpen up that a tiny bit into a definite shape. It does feel like it needs to be darker there, doesn't it? Doesn't it? As if, well, maybe it would be, I don't know. That's the guy's foot. Often the area that you feel needs to be darker, in reality, it's the guy's foot there. In reality, put him in dark shoes. I don't know. So the shadow wants to be warmer, the light wants to be cooler. So I'm making up the subject to suit the abstract requirements of the picture. usually, well, when we start painting, we make up the abstract arrangement of the picture based on what we observe, and that's the way I started painting, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I wish I could do it more, but I've just sort of transitioned into this way of working. So this has become quite a hard line. I'll have to deal with that at some point. But I feel like I'm really just messing about with this area. Like, I don't feel it's good to get annoyed with an area. With the whole painting, yes, but not with an area. Or a specific detail. Like, I've spent too much of my life getting annoyed with the head, like just repainting it and it just not looking the way I want it to, some particular part of it. You get everything right and then the eye's wrong, and then get everything right and there's one little bit. It's just, oh dear. I don't enjoy that. You know, the ultimate challenge is portraiture, really. Now I wonder, you know, the energy has really gone out of what I'm doing now. You know, this sort of stuff here, look at that. I don't know if you can see it, but it's really slick. It's really soft applications, and I just don't, it's just not exciting to me because this paint is skiddy now. And my students often say, oh, there's too much paint on it, it's all wet, I can't do any more. Now, that's not true. I really disagree with that. I can do more on this painting, even though the surface is wet in parts, I can do more. But, you know, I could put more paint on top of that if I wanted to. But these sort of effects are best on dried paint, and so I'm also starting repeating myself, so it's time to stop for today. So thank you for your patience in enduring this marathon painting session, and hope you'll deign to join me again. Good morning. A new day. When I saw the painting this morning, I thought, it's all wet, I don't want to work on it. I wouldn't know what to do anyway. And then I had a few quiet moments, just sat here, trying not to do anything, but just to be here, to be present, and I looked around at the space and I saw a tiny bird in the sky in relationship to the scale of the window, and that was kind of nice. And then there were certain things that struck me that were kind of annoying, like this foot disappears and this blue shape looks too big. Things that I just really wanted to fix. And I wondered if that's a good mindset with which to engage with the painting again, or should I really leave it and let it dry and work on something else? And I felt that was maybe just a bit of a bad mindset to go at it. I just want to fix these little issues before I leave it. Because that's really a trap. And I've done it too many times where I've fixed little bits that annoy me, or even indulged in little things like the faces. So I could start to divide these faces now into slightly warmer and cooler colours and really indulge those areas, and yet the whole structure of the painting would still be as it is. It wouldn't change the structure of the painting, it wouldn't improve it at all. and that would just be redundant. And I'd probably end up painting out those things anyway, because if the whole structure doesn't work, the painting isn't finished. So instead what I did is I walked back as far as I could to the other end of the studio and looked at it from there, and then it really puts things in perspective, just like life, you know, looking at the big picture, looking at it small. And then it told me that, you know what, well, this might take care of itself, but it definitely needs other things. It needs to be darker blue down here, and some other things as well. I can't quite remember now what else, but that's enough to know that it needs to be darker blue down here, and that's a bigger decision than these little things, little tidying ups that I was thinking of. So I'm going to try them and then see what happens from there. Well, the other suggestion that occurred to me was that from a distance, I really saw this shape very clearly as an entity, and I wondered if I should make this lighter so that this shape seems to stop here and become a separate shape, and I wondered if it would be good to connect it a bit further. And also I noticed this probably less defined, but still a kind of shape there, a light shape that goes into this figure that maybe I should define a little bit more. So the shapes that are not within, you know, it's not the shape of a person, it's not the silhouette. Here's a pair of legs, you know, that's a shape, but it breaks into the figure and out again. So I had the feeling that I should be slightly bolder with these darks in the foreground. I have to look from a distance to check how bold. So I'm not as dark as that for sure, but maybe a tad darker than that. That's the idea. So this arm, it's the same as the picture to there, but then it sort of curves around in a somewhat impossible way in my painting. I guess we'll just see what happens. Well, she's got a stump for a hand. So I'm going to mix a flesh colour that fits into there, and that's hopefully more shadowy to red. So I add a bit of green. That's all right. I definitely don't like the vertical nature of that shape, you know, within the context of the painting where it's mostly shapes that swing like this. That's a strange vertical shape. So she's still got a stump, but it's a moving and disguised stump now. I'm trying to tease this elbow, this arm, back of the arm, into that shape a little bit, so it's not such a complete curve. So that's quite a powerful spatial indicator. What I mean is that overlap is the most powerful way of creating a sense of space in a picture, because that overlaps that in a quite clear way. It creates a clear jump in space. I'm just going to settle it down ever so slightly by cooling this colour. It's not only light and dark and an overlapping shape, it's also warm and cool, but now I've just cooled it down a little bit. So I might need to modify this very vertical mark. I feel like it should be more curved. But the other thing that standing way back was suggested to me was that this could be darker here to connect with these dark, cool shadows. So something around here could be darker and cooler to connect to these. So I'm just making a decision there about whether to use thick or thin paint, and I kind of like the calligraphy of marks, and the general design of the area is fine, so I might just use thinner paint to modify the colour without modifying the actual texture of the paint too much. I'm just going to look from a distance. So it may also require something down here, but the main thing I think is here to connect to that very dark across almost behind this figure. It may make that figure pop out a lot. I don't know. So that's one brush stroke, and my initial thought is that it needs another one or it needs softening, but I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'll think about whether there needs to be something darker in this area now. I'm doing a lot of thinking right now. I was wondering about whether this should be dark and cool down here. It would be more literal to a sense of where a shadow might be. And if I wasn't thinking so much, I'd probably just put it in without thinking. But But maybe I'm trying to let less be more, and to leave a few emphatic marks, a few more emphatic marks, and let the overall read of the painting be a little bit more open. In which case, this wouldn't be the most important thing to change right now, but something around here would be. I'll have another think. So the thing with this foreground lady is that she has to be there and in the front, and yet I want you to be able to see through her or past her, really. Maybe I don't want you to stop there. So that's why, in a sense, she's kind of transparent, you know, that the shadow of the bicycle wheel kind of goes through her, and then there's this shadow falling across her that disguises her form further. So she's kind of there but not there. I was just thinking about a really great interview I heard with Jenny Saville, and she got an opportunity, lucky thing, to visit Willem de Kooning's studio. Obviously, he passed away, and her dealer was his dealer, and she got a chance to just spend time in his studio, and everything was left just as it was. And so, you know, he had these two like 6-foot glass pallets either side of the working area, and he had the bowls with mixed colours in, and all these things that really influenced the way that Jenny saw and understood then how he worked. And what being conscious of you watching this makes me aware of how kind of slow and painstaking, that sounds a bad word, but how slow and careful and considered this stage of the painting is. It's not there's a great film, not a great film, about Modigliani, and you know, he's sweating as he's painting, and the passion is flowing, and you know, it's just kind of ridiculous. Okay, you do have times when you work quickly and intuitively, definitely, but there's also, particularly in the type of painting like Jenny Saville type painting or de Kooning, where the brush marks are direct and unfussy and decisive and beautiful. And I'm not saying mine are, but that's what I'm aiming towards. And one assumes that there's just this fast bravado performance of a painting. It looks fast, but actually the whole process is very slow. Like these marks here were done extremely quickly, but the consideration was very slow. And if you work quickly without consideration, then it just turns into a mess. And what you really want is for one mark or one apparent mark to really read as a lot of things and to perform in a lot of ways. So it's performing to keep the composition together, but it's also performing to describe the form in a simple yet effective way. That's what we're aiming for. And so just wanted to put that to you, that it's not a fast, one-paced way of working. And there was something I wanted to do. So we talked about this being a vertical accent, and really I want it to be a more diagonal accent. So, I mean, but the brush marks are great. They're done quickly and they look fine. So how do we negotiate that? Well, I'm going to try and make that vertical into a horizontal by redoing that part of that brush mark a bit lighter. See, already it's not as exciting, but so that there, and then I've pre-mixed these colours. So then change the colour of the stripes. I want these marks to be fast. So hopefully, with that, of course I've destroyed that brush mark going down, I had to, but hopefully the marks are still reasonably fresh, but I've changed it from being a vertical effect to being a more diagonal effect, and the sense of form is hopefully a little bit stronger. well, thanks for coming with me on this journey and ending with a bit of finger painting there. We're not quite at the end of the journey of Summer Plaza. The next thing I did was to put a glaze over the whole painting. So it went from this appearance, which is pretty much where we left it, to this, which was achieved by applying a glaze of magenta and Indian yellow, I think, over the whole thing. And then the next thing I did was just to soften the darks. The darks were a bit strong, so I scrubbed some light blue and red into the darks to soften them. But the whole thing was achieved by this glazing technique, which is thin transparent layer over the whole painting. And it has the advantage not only of modifying, harmonizing the whole painting, but also of emphasizing the texture. So it goes into the ridges and crevices of paint. So I'm still not sure whether the painting's quite there yet, but it's been a great journey so far.